Let me ask you something straight up. Do you ever feel drained, resentful, or like people are constantly walking all over you? That's not bad luck. That's not just the way people are. That's a boundary problem. And if you don't get it under control, your life is going to feel like a doormat you never agreed to be. Boundaries aren't walls. They're fences with gates. You decide who gets in, who stays out, and what behavior is acceptable. Without them, you're not being nice. You're being irresponsible with your own life. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you tolerate disrespect, every time you swallow your truth to avoid conflict, you're handing your power away like it's free candy. And here's the kicker. If you don't set the rules, people will make up their own. Most people hear the word boundaries and picture a brick wall, something that shuts people out, keeps everyone at arm's length, and isolates you from real connection. But that's not what boundaries are about. Boundaries are more like a fence with a gate. Think about it. What does a fence do? It marks where your property begins and ends. It communicates ownership. It says, this part is mine, and I get to decide how it's used, who enters, and under what conditions. And that gate, that's the part most people forget. You don't just lock everyone out. You open the gate when it's healthy, when it's safe, and when it serves you. You close it when it's not. That's the whole deal. When you treat boundaries like walls, you're playing defense out of fear. You're saying, if I let anyone in, they're going to hurt me. But when you treat boundaries like gates, you're coming from a position of strength. You're saying, I welcome people into my life, but only under the terms that respect who I am and what I need. That's a huge shift. One is about protection rooted in fear. The other is about protection rooted in self-respect. Here's the blunt truth. If you don't build your fence, other people will wander into your yard, park their lawn chair, and start grilling burgers like they own the place. And you'll sit there wondering why you feel so resentful. You've got to claim ownership over your time, your energy, your emotional space. Otherwise, you'll keep living like your life is an open field for anyone to trample. Now, I can hear some of you already saying, but I don't want to be rude, or I don't want to push people away. Let me challenge you on that. Boundaries don't push people away. They teach people how to treat you. They filter out the takers, the users, and the energy vampires while letting in the people who actually respect and value you. In fact, without boundaries, you don't have real relationships. You have lopsided arrangements where one person benefits at the expense of the other. That's not connection, that's exploitation. Think about any healthy relationship you've ever seen, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, or even a professional partnership. At the core of it is mutual respect, and respect doesn't just happen. It's built when each person communicates where the fence is and how the gate works. You can't respect what you can't see, so if you're not showing people your boundaries, you're setting them up to fail. Then you get mad, they get defensive, and everyone loses. Boundaries also serve another critical purpose. They protect your priorities. Life is a constant tug of war for your time and attention. Work wants it, family wants it, friends want it, strangers on social media want it. If you don't put a fence around what matters most to you, you'll spend your days reacting instead of creating. You'll end up living somebody else's agenda instead of your own. And here's the hard pill to swallow. You can't blame them for that if you never told them where the line was. That's on you. Let me give you an example. Imagine you've got a coworker who constantly dumps extra tasks on you because they know you'll say yes. You tell yourself you're just being a team player. But what you're really doing is training them to treat you like their safety net. The day you finally say, I can't take that on, I've got my own workload to handle, you're not being rude. You're simply showing them where your fence is. And here's the part most people miss. If they respect you, they'll back off. If they don't respect you, they'll push harder, and then you'll know exactly who you're dealing with. Either way, clarity beats resentment. Boundaries are also about consistency. A gate isn't useful if you leave it swinging wide open one day and padlocked the next. People need to know what to expect. If you say you don't take calls after 10 p.m., but you pick up the phone every time anyway, guess what? You don't have a boundary, you have a suggestion you don't follow. And people don't respect suggestions, they respect standards. That's why you can't just set a boundary once, you have to enforce it every single time until it becomes part of the culture of your relationships. Now, I won't sugarcoat it. When you start treating your boundaries like gates you control, some people are going to get upset. Not everyone is going to clap for you when you finally stop being their doormat. In fact, the people who benefited the most from you having no boundaries will be the loudest complainers when you put them up. And that's where you've got to remind yourself, the people who belong in your life won't be pushed out by your boundaries, they'll be drawn closer by them. The only ones who leave are the ones who were using you. So remember this, boundaries are not about shutting life out, they're about letting the right life in. They're not about punishment, they're about protection. They're not about fear, they're about respect. And the sooner you stop seeing boundaries as walls and start seeing them as gates, the sooner you'll step out of resentment and into real control of your life. Resentment and burnout are not random feelings that just show up one morning like an uninvited guest. They are the natural, predictable consequence of living without boundaries. Every time you say yes when your gut is screaming no, every time you bite your tongue to keep the peace, every time you take on more than your share just to avoid guilt, you are pouring gasoline on a fire that will eventually burn you out. You might not notice it right away. It creeps in slowly, but over time, the toll becomes undeniable. You're exhausted, irritable, and you can't even enjoy the people or the work you once loved because all of it feels like an obligation instead of a choice. Let's be real. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I'd love to feel resentful today. No, resentment builds brick by brick. It starts small. Maybe you agree to help a coworker finish their project. Not a big deal, right? Then it happens again, then again. Before long, it's expected, not appreciated. You start feeling like you're carrying dead weight, and inside you're seething. But here's the kicker. You train them to expect it by never setting a limit. So the anger you feel toward them is really frustration at yourself for never speaking up, and that's the dangerous cycle. Silence breeds resentment, and resentment breeds burnout. Burnout is when your body and mind finally cash the checks your lack of boundaries have been writing. It's not just being tired, it's being depleted. It's when the thought of one more request, one more demand, one more person needing something from you makes you want to scream or shut down completely. That's not weakness. That's biology. Your system has a limit. When you live in constant people-pleasing mode, you override that limit until your body pulls the emergency brake for you. That's when you get sick more often, your mood tanks, and you start dreading things you used to enjoy. The truth is, you can't give what you don't have. You can't pour from an empty cup. But here's the trap people fall into. They think saying no makes them selfish. They tell themselves, if I don't help, they'll think I don't care. Let me flip that for you. Saying yes to everyone else while saying no to yourself is the most selfish move you can make because eventually you won't have anything left to give anybody. You'll show up drained, distracted, and resentful, and that helps no one. Boundaries are not selfish. They're the ultimate form of responsibility. They make sure that when you give, it's genuine and sustainable, not forced and fueled by guilt. Let's cut through the excuses. If you're burnout, that's not just about a bad boss or demanding family or needy friends. That's about your failure to step up and define where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. Nobody else can do that for you. People will always take what you offer, and many will keep taking as long as you let them. That doesn't make them evil. It makes them human. But it does make it your job to draw the line. Think about how resentment changes your energy in relationships. When you do things out of obligation instead of choice, your presence carries a hidden price tag. You might smile on the outside, but inside you're tallying up the cost. I gave up my evening for you. I swallowed my opinion again. I covered your slack for the 10th time. And eventually that silent invoice comes due. You blow up, or you withdraw, or you start keeping score. None of that builds closeness or trust. It poisons the relationship, often beyond repair. And all of it could have been prevented by an honest boundary up front. So if you're feeling burnout, let me be blunt, stop blaming everyone else for demanding too much. Start asking yourself why you keep handing out pieces of yourself without limits. Why do you think your needs matter less? Why do you keep pretending you can handle it all when you clearly can't? The answer isn't to toughen up, it's to wise up. Because tough people still burn out if they don't manage their energy. Smart people draw boundaries before they reach that point. Here's the bottom line. Resentment is a signal, not a personality trait. If you're bitter, if you're snapping at people, if you're silently hating the commitments on your calendar, that's your inner alarm system saying, enough, put up a fence, close the gate, take back control. Burnout is not a badge of honor. It's proof you've been mismanaging your own resources. And until you take that seriously, you'll stay on the hamster wheel of overgiving, overextending, and underliving. So don't wait for resentment to poison your relationships or burnout to wreck your health. Stop treating boundaries like an optional skill and start treating them like oxygen. Because without them, you'll keep gasping for air in a life that should be yours to breathe freely. Boundaries don't create distance. They create the space you need to give and live from a place of strength, not depletion. Respect is not given just because you want it. Respect is earned when you teach people how to treat you and then back it up with action. That's where clear communication plus consequences comes in. Too many people walk around frustrated because others don't get it. But the truth is, you've probably never laid it out in plain language. People aren't mind readers. They don't live in your head. If you want respect, you've got to open your mouth and communicate exactly where the line is, and then you've got to show that line has teeth. Otherwise, you're just issuing empty threats that no one takes seriously. Clear communication means stripping away the fluff, the apologies, and the over-explaining. It's not about giving a lecture or justifying why you need what you need. It's about stating the boundary as simply as possible. Instead of saying, well, I was wondering if maybe it might be possible for you to not call so late at night because I get up early and I really need my rest, you cut the fat and say, I don't take calls after 10 p.m. That's it, straightforward, calm, no apology. When you communicate like that, you send a message that you take yourself seriously. And when you take yourself seriously, other people start taking you seriously too. But communication alone is not enough. If you set a boundary and then let people trample it without consequence, you've just taught them that your words are meaningless. Imagine a parent who tells their kid, if you don't do your homework, no TV, but then lets the kid watch anyway. How long do you think it takes before that kid realizes the rule is just noise? Adults are no different. If you say, I won't tolerate being yelled at, but you sit there and absorb it, the message isn't, I value respect. It's, I'll put up with disrespect as long as you dish it out. Consequences are the backbone of boundaries. They show that your standards are not negotiable. Now, a lot of people hear consequences and think that means punishment. That's not what this is about. Consequences aren't about teaching someone a lesson. They're about protecting yourself. If someone disrespects your boundary, the consequence is what you do to maintain your own self-respect. If you tell a friend, I don't loan money, and they ask again, the consequence is you repeat the boundary and refuse. If your partner calls you names during an argument and you've said you won't tolerate that, the consequence might be ending the conversation and leaving the room until they calm down. You're not punishing them. You're enforcing the terms under which you're willing to engage. This is where people often trip up. They communicate the boundary, but they don't follow through on the consequence. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. It risks conflict. It risks someone being upset with you. But let me give you a harsh reality check. The momentary discomfort of enforcing a consequence is nothing compared to the long-term damage of living without respect. When you let people get away with crossing your line, you're teaching them it's open season on your energy, your time, and your dignity. And once you teach them that, don't expect them to suddenly change. People rise to the level of the standards you set and enforce. There's also a subtle but powerful shift that happens when you combine communication with consequences. You stop being reactive and start being proactive. Instead of waiting until you're fed up and exploding, you calmly set the terms from the beginning. You take control of the situation before it spirals. That builds respect because people see you as consistent, steady, and reliable. They know where they stand with you, and trust me, even if they don't like your boundary, deep down they respect the clarity. Nobody respects a pushover, but everyone respects someone who stands firm on their word. Here's something else to think about. Vague boundaries invite manipulation. If you say, please don't take advantage of me, that's too fuzzy. What does take advantage even mean? People can wiggle around that. But if you say, I can't work overtime this weekend, there's no wiggle room, it's black and white. The clearer you are, the less space there is for excuses or confusion. Clear language plus consistent follow-through removes the gray area where disrespect likes to hide. Now, I'm not going to pretend this is easy. When you first start pairing communication with consequences, some people will push back hard. They'll test you. They'll accuse you of being cold, selfish, or difficult. That's not proof you're doing something wrong. That's proof your new boundaries are working. Because the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries are suddenly uncomfortable. They're losing access to the parts of you they used to exploit. And that discomfort often shows up as guilt trips or backlash. Don't cave. That's the moment when respect is either built or broken. If you hold firm, they'll adjust or they'll walk. Either way, you win. So remember this formula: clear communication plus consequences equals respect. Say what you mean what you say, and back it up with action. That's how you train people to value your time, your energy, and your presence. That's how you shift from being frustrated and resentful to being calm and confident. People don't respect what you allow, they respect what you enforce. And if you don't enforce it, don't complain when you keep getting disrespected. The responsibility starts with you. People love to treat boundaries like some magical trait you're either born with or not. They say, well, I've just never been good at saying no, or I'm too nice, I can't do boundaries. That's nonsense. Boundaries are not personality traits, they're skills. And like any skill, you don't master them in one day. You build them through practice, through reps, through showing up consistently, even when it feels awkward. Think about it like lifting weights. Nobody walks into a gym for the first time and deadlifts 300 pounds. You start small, your muscles shake, you feel uncomfortable, but with enough repetition, you get stronger. Boundaries are built the same way. At first, setting a boundary feels unnatural. Maybe your voice shakes when you say no. Maybe your heart races. Maybe you replay the conversation 100 times afterward, worrying about what the other person thinks. That's normal. It's the same as muscle soreness after a workout. It's just proof you're using a muscle you haven't trained before. The mistake people make is assuming that discomfort means they're doing something wrong. In reality, discomfort is the price of growth. Every rep of saying no, every rep of enforcing a consequence, Every rep of choosing your needs over people-pleasing is a step towards strength. Here's the truth: nobody becomes confident at boundaries by reading a book or listening to a speech. Confidence comes from evidence. You build evidence that you can set a limit, survive the pushback, and still be okay. Each time you do it, your nervous system learns, I can handle this. That's how self-respect grows, not by waiting to feel ready, but by acting in spite of not feeling ready. Waiting until you're comfortable is just procrastination dressed up as caution. You've got to do the reps now if you want to see the results later. Start small if you have to. If saying no to your boss terrifies you, start by saying no to something low stakes, like declining a social invite when you're too tired. That one rep matters. The more reps you stack, the bigger boundaries you can handle. You don't go from 0 to expert overnight, but you will be shocked how fast your capacity grows once you start. Just like strength training, progress compounds. One rep leads to another, and before long, you're doing things you never thought possible. But let's also be honest here. Building boundaries takes consistency, not perfection. You're going to mess up. You're going to agree to something you didn't want to do, or you're going to set a boundary and then backtrack when someone pushes back. That doesn't mean you're failing. That means you're learning. The only true failure is quitting and going back to being a doormat. Every mistake is feedback. Every time you falter, you reflect, adjust, and take another rep. The muscle doesn't grow from one perfect workout. It grows from showing up again and again. Another piece of this is endurance. Anybody can set a boundary once. The real challenge is maintaining it when the pressure ramps up. People will test you, sometimes over and over. They'll wait to see if you really mean it or if you'll cave eventually. That's where reps matter most. Every time you stand firm, you reinforce the message, this is not negotiable. And eventually people stop testing. They adjust to the new normal. But that only happens if you outlast the resistance phase. Most people give up too early, right when their new habit is about to take root. Don't be one of those people. Push through the awkward reps until the boundary becomes second nature. Think about any area of life you've ever improved in: school, career, fitness, relationships. Did it happen because you got lucky? No. It happened because you practiced, failed, adjusted, and kept going. Boundaries are no different. You want to be respected. Put in the reps. You want to stop feeling resentful and burnout. Put in the reps. You want to be someone who commands respect instead of begging for it. Put in the reps. Stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect words. Just start, because no rep is wasted, even the ugly ones. And let me add this. The people who matter most in your life are watching. They're paying attention to whether you value yourself enough to set limits. When you start doing the reps, you're not just building your own self-respect, you're teaching others how to value you too. The first few times may feel clunky, but over time you'll notice a shift. People will treat you differently, not because they suddenly changed, but because you trained them through consistent action. That's the payoff of putting in the reps. You earn a level of respect and peace that no amount of people pleasing could ever buy. So here's the bottom line: boundaries are not a gift you're waiting to be given. They're a muscle you're responsible for building. The more you practice, the stronger you get. The stronger you get, the easier it becomes. And before long, what used to feel terrifying, saying no, walking away, demanding respect, becomes automatic. But none of that happens if you don't do the work. No reps, no growth. Do the reps, own the results. It's that simple.